The most dangerous version of evil is the one that has learned to be generous. Not the tyrant who burns cities, not the fanatic who screams in the square, but the quiet benefactor who solves every problem except the one that matters. In 1900, a Russian philosopher named Vladimir Solovyov wrote a story about the end of the world. It contained no apocalypse, no horsemen, no plague. Instead, it described a man, brilliant, compassionate, elected by acclamation, who gave humanity everything it wanted, and that was the catastrophe. This video traces a single obsession through the work of a thinker most in the West have never encountered, and a prophecy that reads less like theology with each passing year. Two questions will press against everything that follows. First, can evil perfect itself until it becomes indistinguishable from good? Second, what happens to a civilization that can no longer recognize its enemies because they look exactly like its heroes? Vladimir Sergeyevich Solovyov was born in Moscow in 1853, the son of Russia's most celebrated historian. His childhood was spent among books older than the nation itself. By 13, he had rejected Christianity entirely. By 21, he had returned to it, but to a version so strange that neither the church nor the academy quite knew what to do with him. His doctoral thesis, The Crisis of Western Philosophy, published in 1874 when he was just 21, argued that European thought had exhausted itself. Rationalism had eaten its own foundations. Kant had shown the limits of reason. Hegel had turned history into logic. Schopenhauer had turned logic into suffering. And after suffering, Solovyov asked what remains. His answer was not more philosophy. It was a vision. At 22, in the reading room of the British Museum, Solovyov saw Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom, for the second time in his life. He had first seen her at age 9 during a church service. She appeared wreathed in blue and gold, a presence he would spend his entire life trying to articulate in the language of systematic thought. This is important. Solovyov was not a mystic who dabbled in philosophy. He was a rigorous thinker who had seen something he could not unsee and refused to pretend otherwise. The tension between those two commitments, the rational and the revealed, would define everything he wrote, and ultimately, it would break him. Through the 1870s and 1880s, Solovyov developed a breathtaking project. He called it total unity. Verseyenstvo, the reconciliation of all things, faith and reason, East and West, God and world. His lectures on divine humanity, delivered in St. Petersburg between 1878 and 1881, drew packed audiences. Dostoevsky himself attended. Tolstoy exchanged letters with him. The central argument was staggering in its ambition. Christ, Solovyov claimed, was not merely a historical event. He was the structural principle of reality itself, the point where the divine and the human actually touch. And the task of civilization, the real task beneath all politics and economics, was to build structures worthy of that encounter. This was not a metaphor. Solovyov proposed a literal theocracy, the union of the Russian Orthodox Church with the Roman Catholic papacy under a restored Christian empire. You can imagine how this was received. The Orthodox establishment accused him of betraying Russia. Rome was politely uninterested. The Slavophiles who had championed him turned cold. And here's where the story turns. Because it was not the rejection that changed Solovyov. It was what the rejection revealed. He had believed that goodness, clearly articulated, would compel assent. That truth, once visible, would unify. He discovered instead that people do not refuse the good because they cannot see it. They refuse it because they prefer something else. And the something else can wear the face of the good so convincingly that even the philosopher is fooled. Ask yourself, is that not the most terrifying proposition philosophy has ever produced? Not that evil exists, but that it learns? By the 1890s, Solovyov's thought had undergone a profound inversion. The optimist of total unity was becoming something far more unsettling. A prophet of total substitution. His 1897 masterwork, The Justification of the Good, already showed the shift. Morality, he argued, is not a set of rules. It is the orientation of the whole person toward what is real. And the great danger of the modern age is not immorality. It is morality detached from its source. Ethics without ontology. Goodness without God. This brought him into direct collision with Tolstoy. The collision matters because it contains the seed of everything Solovyov would write in his final year. Tolstoy's position was luminous and simple. Evil is the absence of love. Therefore resist nothing. Return no violence. Let goodness disarm the aggressor by its sheer radiance. Solovyov's reply was devastating. What if the aggressor is not disarmed? What if evil is not an absence but a presence, a will with its own intelligence, capable of mimicking the very love you oppose it with? Consider this carefully. Tolstoy assumed evil was stupid. Solovyov's entire late philosophy rests on the terrifying premise that evil is brilliant. Not brilliant in the way of a criminal mastermind, brilliant in the way of a saint, or rather, in the way something becomes when it has studied saints long enough to pass as one. This is the argument Solovyov could not let go. And in 1899, dying of kidney failure and exhaustion at 47, he sat down to write the work that would outlast everything else he had done. 3 Conversations on War, Progress, and the End of Universal History was published in 1900, months before Solovyov's death. Appended to it was a short narrative he called A Short Tale of the Antichrist. The 3 conversations are a philosophical dialogue. 4 characters debate the nature of evil over 3 evenings. A general who believes in just war. A politician who believes in progress. A prince, transparently modeled on Tolstoy, who believes evil can be overcome by moral example alone. And a mysterious Mr. Z, who listens, waits, and finally reads aloud the tale. The prince argues beautifully. Evil is a misunderstanding. War is barbarism. If we are good enough, consistently enough, evil will simply dissolve. Solovyov lets this argument breathe. He lets it seduce. And then Mr. Z asks a single question. If evil is only the absence of good, then why does it so often anticipate our strategies? Why does it adapt? The prince has no answer, and into that silence, Mr. Z reads the tale. The story is set in the 21st century. Europe has unified. Wars have ceased, and a man appears, young, brilliant, beautiful, who writes a book called The Open Way, Universal Peace and Prosperity. The book is a masterpiece. It synthesizes every tradition, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, secular, humanist. The world weeps with gratitude. He's elected president of Europe, then emperor of the world. He abolishes poverty. He solves the ecological crisis. He funds the arts. He is, by every measurable standard, the greatest humanitarian who has ever lived. And Solovyov's genius, the reason this story has haunted readers for over a century, is in what comes next. The emperor calls a great council of all Christian churches. He offers the Catholics the restoration of full papal authority. He offers the Protestants a World Institute for Free Biblical Scholarship. He offers the Orthodox a Museum of Sacred Antiquities. Each gift is precisely what each church has always wanted. Each is perfectly generous, and each is a bribe. Because here is what the emperor does not offer. He does not offer himself. He does not say, "I am under the same authority as you." He does not say, "I serve what you serve." He replaces worship with satisfaction. He gives the churches everything they desire, except the one thing that makes a church: submission to something beyond human will. And most accept. Most are grateful. The buildings are beautiful. The funding is lavish. The persecution has ended. What more could faith ask for? But a remnant refuses. An elderly Catholic pope, a Protestant professor, and an Orthodox elder, Solovyov names him Elder John. Each in turn asks the emperor the same question. It is the simplest question in the history of theology. It is the one question a humanitarian genius cannot answer without revealing himself. Do you confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh? The emperor's face changes. For the first time in the story, the mask slips. Not into rage, not into hatred, into something Solovyov describes with surgical precision: a cold, absolute indifference. This is the moment that separates Solovyov from every other apocalyptic writer. The reveal is not dramatic. There is no thunder. The Antichrist does not snarl or transform. He simply stops pretending to care. And in that instant, the difference between philanthropy and love becomes visible. The difference between giving people what they want and submitting to what they need. Solovyov writes in the voice of Elder John, "You have given us everything except what we care about: Jesus Christ." There is no other line in Russian philosophy that cuts deeper. The remnant is killed. The tale ends with their resurrection and the fall of the false emperor. But the theology is almost beside the point. What matters is the diagnosis. What did Solovyov actually see? Not a prediction of a literal Antichrist. Or not only that, he saw a pattern, a logic that operates wherever the good is replaced by the useful. Think about it structurally. The Antichrist does not oppose Christ. He replaces him. He delivers the same outcomes: peace, prosperity, unity, through a fundamentally different mechanism. Human will alone, answerable to nothing. The outcomes look identical. The source is inverted. And Solovyov's claim, his terrible, impolite claim, is that the source matters more than the outcome. This is where modern readers resist. And they should resist. The objection is obvious. Does it matter why someone feeds the hungry, so long as the hungry are fed? Solovyov's answer is yes. Because the humanitarian who feeds from will alone must eventually decide who deserves to eat. And that decision, unchecked by anything above the self, becomes indistinguishable from tyranny. The smile is the key. The Antichrist smiles because he is genuinely pleased. He has solved the problems. He has earned the gratitude. His only flaw, his only structural flaw, is that he believes this is enough. That he, a man, however brilliant, can stand where the sacred once stood and fill the same space. Solovyov's word for this is not evil. It is self-deification, the quiet kind, the kind that helps. Now, extending this beyond theology, you do not need to be a Christian, or religious at all, to hear the structural warning. Any system that solves human problems while quietly eliminating the question of what humans are for has performed the same substitution. The mechanism is identical whether the emperor wears a crown or a logo. Solovyov died on July 31st in 1900 at the estate of his friend Prince Trubetskoy, daughter White. He was 47. His kidneys had failed. His body was ruined by years of ascetic excess and overwork. But his mind had been clear to the end. In his final months, friends reported that he spoke constantly about the Antichrist, not as fiction, but as something he believed was already forming in the logic of the age. He was not predicting a person. He was diagnosing a grammar, a syntax of substitution that would become fluent in the century to come. Replace transcendence with therapy. Replace obligation with preference. Replace the question, what is true, with what works, and you have performed the operation Solovyov described without needing a single emperor. The system does it for you, impersonally, efficiently, with a smile. Nikolai Berdyaev, who knew Solovyov's work intimately, later wrote that the tale of the Antichrist was the most prophetic text in Russian literature, not because it predicted events, because it predicted a mood. The mood of a civilization that has solved its material problems and discovered, too late, that it has no language left for the ones that remain. What does it mean to live well? What do we owe the dead? Is there something we are not permitted to optimize? These are not questions the Antichrist forbids. He simply makes them unnecessary. And that, Solovyov understood, is the deeper violence, not the silencing of the question, but the removal of the need to ask it. We began with two threads. The first, can evil perfect itself until it becomes indistinguishable from good? Solovyov's answer was not merely yet. It was worse than yes. Evil does not need to become good. It only needs to become helpful. The rest follows on its own. The second, what happens to a civilization that cannot distinguish its enemies from its heroes? It does not fall. It does not collapse. It simply forgets that the distinction ever mattered. And it calls that forgetting progress. Solovyov saw all of this from a sickbed in a dying empire. He had no audience left. His theocratic dream was ashes. His body had failed him. But he had eyes. And what he saw, with the unbearable clarity of a man who had nothing left to lose,